I offer a reading from the German poet Rainer Maria Rilke from his little book, I think it's called, what is it called? Prayers to a something God. I've forgotten now exactly what it is. All will come into its strength. All will come into its strength. The fields undivided, the waters undammed, the trees towering and the walls built low. And in the valleys, people as strong and varied as the land. And no churches where God is imprisoned and lamented like a trapped and wounded animal. The houses welcoming all who knocked, and a sense of boundless offering in all relations, and in you and me. No yearning for an afterlife, no looking beyond, no belittling of death, but only longing for what belongs to us, and serving earth lest we remain unused. Thus ends our reading.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today.
John Lennon really was a dreamer, wasn't he? Imagine there's no heaven and hell, he says. Well, a fair number of people nowadays probably already imagine that. But no countries, no religion, no possessions. I don't know about you, but I'm not so sure I'm ready to go there. In any case, nearly half a century after Lennon wrote that song, most of the things he invites us to imagine seem even farther away than ever. John Lennon, of course, was not the first to try to imagine a world made fair and all her people one. Nearly 3,000 years ago, Hebrew prophets held up a similar vision. Amos cried, "Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream." Isaiah looked forward to the day when they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they study war anymore. A few centuries later, in ancient Greece, Plato imagined a city-state governed by philosopher kings. As far as I know, nobody has ever actually tried it. In fact, the very idea seems about as far as you could get from the government of our country or pretty much any country today. Throughout the centuries, people have imagined, envisioned, and sometimes even tried to create something like the world this song imagines. A world of peace and unity. A world of justice, mercy, and fairness. A world of equality and compassion. In the earliest Christian communities, people shared everything in common, trying to live the way Jesus taught them. Similar communities, utopian communities, have sprung up again and again since then, trying to create the perfect society. In the 18th and 19th centuries, our own country was home to a surprising number of such communities. There was the Oneida community and Brook Farm and the Shakers and a host of others, most of which most of us haven't even heard of. Some lasted longer than others, but none except the Shakers lasted very long, and even they have almost completely died out now. There was a reason why Sir Thomas More called such communities utopias. The word comes from the Greek meaning no place. Half a century ago, Martin Luther King Jr. had a dream of peace, racial justice, and equality that inspired a nation. It still inspires us today. Yet for all the progress we've made, we're still a long, long way from realizing his dream. Within my own denomination, the Unitarian Universalist Association, we've been working to combat racism for decades. We've had anti-racist trainings and anti-racist, anti-oppression, multicultural programs and positions on boards. We've had African American and Latino presidents, and we've worked to eliminate unintentionally racist language from our hymns and our readings. We knew there was still a long way to go, but overall, we were thinking we were doing pretty well. Yet only recently have we, that is, we in the white majority, have we begun to face how deeply we are still complicit in white supremacy, in a system that is so pervasive we can't even see it, any more than the fish can see the water they swim in. And so we might ask, why bother? If imagining and envisioning and even trying to create an ideal world haven't got us there in 3,000 years, what's the point of imagining one now? And yet we do. We go on singing the song and dreaming the dream, in spite of the fact that it doesn't look like it's ever going to come true.
Imagine there's no country. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for. No religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one.
I was born deep in the Jim Crow South. But my family moved north when I was still too young to understand how brutal segregation was. For me, that had always been just how things were. By the time the school desegregation movement began, I was in high school, living in a lily-white suburb in New England. I knew something of what was happening, and I had my own ideas about how to meet the challenge of school desegregation. But I was young and naive. I had very little idea how the world worked. I had what I thought was a simple and elegant solution to desegregating the schools. What they should do, I thought, was simply start one grade at a time. Integrate first grade this year, first and second grades next year, and so on until all 12 grades were integrated. I figured that the youngest kids were least likely to share their parents' prejudices, so integrating them would be comparatively easy. By the time they were older, they'd be used to racially mixed classes, and it wouldn't be a problem. I thought I had an answer, but in fact, I didn't even have a clue. Not a clue that it wasn't about the kids, it was about the adults. Not a clue about how deep the divisions were, the hatred, the belief in white supremacy. I thought it could be easy. I've spent the rest of my life learning how hard it really is. The question I'd ask today is it even possible? Some of our 19th century forebears seem to think it was just a matter of time. Listen to the confidence in this poem, published in 1880 and sung in a hymn in our Unitarian churches. These things shall be, a loftier race than e'er the world has known, shall rise with flames of freedom in their souls and light of science in their eyes. Nation with nation, land with land, unarmed, shall live as comrades free. In every mind and heart shall throb the pulse of one humanity. Wouldn't the folks who first sang that be disappointed to know that nearly a century and a half later, we're no closer to those things than they were? One of our 19th century Unitarian affirmations declared belief in, quote, the progress of mankind upward and onward forever. Events of the 20th century, the Holocaust foremost among them, pretty much put paid to that kind of confidence. Martin Luther King Jr. had a dream, not a prediction. John Lennon doesn't predict. He imagines and invites us to imagine with him. Yet, if we take a closer look at what he invites us to imagine, I think we might find some clues about how to get there. At least how to get a little closer. The things he wants us to imagine away are all things that divide and separate us. For many people, maybe not all, but for many people, for example, believing in heaven and hell divides the world into the saved and the unsaved. Countries may foster a sense of unity among their own people, but then they define other countries as enemies. And the next thing you know, people are at war and killing each other. Religion can be a good thing. Would we all be here this morning if we didn't think so? It can and does bring together the people who share it. But if I believe that my religion is better than your religion, if I believe that anybody of a different religion is an infidel and deserves contempt or even death, if I believe that my religion gives me the right to discriminate against you, then religion divides and separates us, becomes destructive. The song invites us to imagine a world without all the things that divide us into us and them. It invites us to claim the vision of an earth made fair and all her people one. But people have imagined that world and claimed that vision for thousands of years. And here we are today, as separate and divided as ever. So I ask again, what's the point of even trying? And what's going on that in spite of the fact that we seem to be getting nowhere, we keep on singing the song and dreaming the dream?
Imagine no possession, I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger, a brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one.
A recent scholarly article in the Journal of Media and Religion identified a small group of popular songs as what they called secular hymns. These songs are not overtly religious, but they include religious themes, especially themes of redemption and deliverance. Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah is one of those songs. You know that one. So is Over the Rainbow. You know that one too. And so is Imagine. Especially for the increasing number of people these days who identify as spiritual but not religious, maybe even including some of us here this morning, these songs seem to fill a real spiritual need. According to Wikipedia, Rolling Stone ranked Imagine number 3 on its list of the 500 greatest songs of all time, describing it as an enduring hymn of solace and promise that has carried us through extreme grief from the shock of Lennon's own death in 1980 to the unspeakable horror of September 11th. It's now impossible to imagine a world without Imagine, and we need it more than he ever dreamed. And yet we know that singing this song is not enough. Just imagining is not enough. They haven't got us to that perfect world in 3,000 years, and they won't get us there in 3,000 more. If we want to move in that direction, even a little bit, we have to do more than dream. We have to do something. Now, these days, there are a lot of things that need doing, and I know a lot of you are doing them. From writing to Congress, to protesting in the streets, from feeding the hungry, to harboring refugees, and so on, and so on. Some of us can do some of these things, others can do other ones. But there is one thing we can all do, something I believe faith calls us to do. In a world where there are so many things that divide us into us versus them, if we want to imagine a better world into being, we need to be about making connections at every level, from the neighborhood to the world. Or rather, not exactly making connections, but rather making visible the inescapable network of connections in which we already live and move and have our being. The interdependent web of all creation, of which we are intrinsically, inescapably, radically a part. We might take our cue from the poet who wrote, "He drew a circle that shut me out. Heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle and took him in." challenge is to keep drawing those wider circles wherever we can, even when it's hard to do, especially when it's hard to do. Our challenge is not to get rid of religion, but it is to have the courage to believe the people who tell us that our religion, yes, even mine and maybe even yours, continues to shut them out, and instead learn to welcome them in. Our challenge is not to get rid of all our possessions, but it is to use our possessions to do good. You know that, to help people who have less. Even more is to work toward a world where no one is obscenely wealthy while the poor struggle to get enough to eat. Our challenge is not to erase all the national boundaries, but it is to lift up the highest ideals of our country and other countries, so that our country and all countries become places to live for, not to die for. In every part of our lives, we can take to heart the words of the poet Marge Piercy, who wrote, "It starts when you care to act. It starts when you do it again after they said no. It starts when you say we and know who you mean. And each day you mean one more." It starts when you say we and know who you mean, and each day you mean one more. Our challenge is to do all these things and more. Dreaming and imagining will not get us there. And yet, we still need the dream. We need the vision. We need to use every bit of our imagination to point the way where we would go, to hold before us a vision of the world we would bring into being. We need to sing this song again and again to remind us of where we're going and why.
You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one.
Please join me in a moment of prayer. God of our hearts, Spirit of life and of love, in whom the one and the many are woven and interwoven in the great web of all that is, in which there is nothing that is separate. Nothing can be severed from the whole, and yet in which each thinnest thread and smallest knot is unique and valuable. Rock us gently in the web of life, that we may feel what we cannot always see, our intricate and untraceable connection with all that is, seen and unseen, and with you, the great mystery in whom we live and move and have our being. May we draw strength from that connection to do the work each of us is uniquely called to do. And may we find courage from one another to go out into the world as partners in the long, hard work of creation, repairing the parts of the web which we humans have broken in our carelessness, our selfishness, our hatred, weaving anew the places which have grown thin from lack of love. So be it. Blessed be, and amen. I brought you a hymn this morning. It's a new one for you. It's one I happen to